Hello, everyone. How you doing? You're welcome to the Development Sector Series, which is Devsectorseries. How you all doing today? Again, apologies for starting a little meeting by a few minutes. Technology. You gotta take the good with the bad, but I'm so happy to be here with you. So if you like what you're seeing and you like the program, please show me some love. Like, subscribe, click on the bell notification so that you can be notified of future videos, okay? So thank you all so much for your extreme support. Please continue to support us. Now, today we're having a special guest today. Her name is Abiodun Baiyewu. She is the Executive Director of Global Rights. We are going to be talking about the civic space, okay, and civil society organizations and their role in the civic space. So, having those kinds of conversations is really important because it's going to take all of us. It's going to take the government sector, it's going to take the private sector and civil society so that we can promote citizen engagement and keep the civic space open, okay, so that we can express ourselves. So we're going to be talking more about that because guess what? Civil society organizations are the platforms for citizen engagement. It's platform for you, me, anybody to just get involved in national development. So we're going to be having an exciting discussion with this extremely special guest. Remember, like and share. Also, let me know where you are watching from so that I can thank you personally for watching this broadcast. Again, thank you so much for watching Devsectorseries. Those of you on LinkedIn, please make sure you share. Let's continue to increase engagement, Facebook and YouTube. All right, guys, we're about to share the video bio of our guest. So just give me a second. Let me do just that, okay? All right. Baiyewu is the Executive Director of Global Rights, whose work currently spans several portfolios, which include programs on access to remedies, women's rights, natural resource governance, civic space strengthening, security, and human rights program. Her work focuses on programs that address governance failures that exacerbate the disenfranchisement of the violations of the rights of the poor, marginalized, women, and victims of discrimination. Abiodun is the co-chair of the steering committee of African Coalition for Corporate Accountability, a coalition of more than 130 organizations across 32 countries. She is the co-convener of Nigeria Mourns, the chair of Justice and Empowerment Initiative, and a member of the governing boards of Annie's Place, Swarina Initiative, Weevil, and the Initiative for Participation and Inclusive Development. She has worked with community organizations in Nigeria, including the Negotiation and Conflict Management Group, the Center for Africa Policy and Peace Strategy, and the American Center for International Labor Solidarity. She is an alum of the Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C., where she was also a Women's Law and Public Policy Fellow in the Leadership and Advocacy for Women in Africa program. In addition, she is an accredited mediator, dispute resolution trainer, and an HIV/AIDS youth counselor. Allow me to introduce to some and present to others Abiodun Baiyewu, the Executive Director of Global Rights. Hello, Abby. How are you? You are welcome to the Development Sector Series. Hello, are you there? Hello, Abby, are you there? It looks like there's some issues with network, but she should be here shortly. Hello, Abby, are you there? Okay. Just a second. It looks like there are some network issues. Okay. Just a second. Hello, Abby. How are you? Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. It looks like we're having some network challenges today, but we're gonna plow through because this is an important conversation. We will not be deterred.
No, we won't. No, we won't.
Okay. So we're going to be having conversations about civil society organizations and their role in the civic space here in Nigeria. So global rights has been working on the civic space and has been on the ground with the grassroots and grass tops here in Nigeria. So you have a very good grasp of what is happening. So we're just gonna kind of go right to it, okay? So our first question is, historically, what has civil society done to promote social equity in Nigeria?
Well, at the root of social equity in Nigeria is civil society itself, whether you think pre-colonial, during the colonial era, and post-colonial. That pre-colonial, that we had local administration systems that recognized the role of civil society, of community unions who were able to challenge leadership and say, this is how we think that things should be run. And they were always taking in that factor was always taken in. And that in that sector, in that civic space, that you had different interests, whether you were women, you were young people, people living with disability, minorities, that they all got a chance to have their say. And in that chance to have their say, that equity was built into society. And that as civil society got more formalized in Nigeria, if you will, during the colonial era, post-colonial era, that they were at the front of pointing out where the gaps were, and in many times fulfilling the gaps, especially because governance has always traditionally been weak in this part of the world. So whether it was in healthcare, whether it's in education, whether it's in social protection, you've had civil society actors always at the forefront of ensuring social equity in Nigeria. Most important for social equity is the idea of participatory governance, that everyone has a chance to decide how the society should be run. And civil society has been at the front of amplifying voices across Nigeria, whether as formal groups, whether as activists or as NGOs, as many civil society organizations are now currently fashioned. When you think about your community development groups, when you think about health NGOs, and you think about the pandemics we've had with HIV, with COVID, when you think about the advancements that we've made with agriculture, for example, and you think of the role of groups like IITA, when you think about the pro-democracy groups that led us through the military era, when you think in the present times, the groups and the individuals that continue to insist against corruption, for open space, for the civic freedoms to be kept open, that you're talking civil society, and that hasn't changed in roughly the 200 years that we can document of actions across Nigeria.
That's really interesting, the way you put it in terms of civil society involving everyone, and then how it has evolved over the years in Nigeria and how it has even become institutionalized, and the response we're getting from the fact that voices have become amplified over the years. So now we talk about the civic space. So what do you feel? You've highlighted the fact that civil society organizations have become more institutionalized over the years. How has that affected their role in the civic space?
It's a double-edged sword. So it's been both positive and negative. Positive because then we can do things in more formal ways. We've acquired skill to focus entirely on the civic space, on fulfilling our critical mission. So in that manner, it's become a full-time profession for a number of people like me, people like you. And that we bring in all of our A game, our skills, and our effort into that. In that way, it's been positive. The negative part of it is that we're not as quick and adapt to knee-jerk reactions, and that sometimes in the way things are constructed, if we don't think through our programming, that we leave out the communities that we profess to represent. So in that way, it's been a bit negative. Also that people, because we live in a largely informal country where a lot of things are informal, that people find it more difficult to associate with formal organizations than organic organizations. But then organic organizations have become formal organizations as well. And it's just thinking through and ensuring that because we become more professional, that we do not lose the organic touch and the movements that come with being organic.
That is a really excellent point. Even when I was in civil society and an organizer in Chicago, we started off as a small organization engaging the community, going from block to block. And then once the publicity came in, and then we started getting funding, and there was programming and direct services, it then began to affect our touch with the community. Though we were advocating for policies that would positively impact the community, there was a bit of a disconnect, and it was my role to then make sure that there was a connection to get the pulse of the community, and the community was aware of who we were and what we were trying to do. So it's a bit of a challenge when you institutionalize an organization, especially once it comes from the ground. Like when I see organizations like Enough is Enough, it came from a grassroots driven movement.
Right.
So now it's just kind of, okay, now that we're institutionalizing, we need to make sure that we are connected to the pulse, and which they've done an excellent job doing. And I think it's a bit of a challenge that we kind of have to navigate as civil society as a whole. So it's a really good point you've made. So now we're now really going to the meat of things. How do you feel? Has the government been responsive to activists and CSOs? How has that worked out over the years?
Has the government been responsive? Yes. The question is, have they been positively responsive or very negatively responsive? By and large, they've been negatively responsive. And I'm talking of different administrations. I go back to the colonial era, that they were not very positively responsive to civil groups, and many times sought to quash them. But we were able to overcome that. And then we went into the 40 years of military rule. And of course, that space became closed, not just repressed, but became very, very closed. And then we were able to overcome that. Now we've come into the 22 years of a democracy, if you will. But then we've now gone, as you've also pointed out, that we've gone from being an obstructed space to a repressed space that is getting close to being a closed space once again. So the government has been responsive, but it's not being positive by and large. There are times when government has been positively responsive. Now, if government did not receive the help that civil society provided with development, so for example, in the health sector, We know that civil society in Nigeria are largely responsible for the wins we've had, whether it's with HIV, with maternal health, with community health. If government had not been positive to receive those forms of technical assistance, financing from civil society, we'll be a mess right now with COVID as well. That if they were not responsive, for example, to some of the issues we've had with corruption, that even though there's been a back and forth with corruption, that things will be a lot worse in that regard. With education as well, the government has, in some instances, been responsive. But by and large, government has been repressive, especially when you question their policies or you try to engage in participatory governance with dissent. Then they really don't like that.
Okay. So I'm going to just ask a follow-up question to that. I was in a 2-day summit, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, where it was a government, private sector, civil society coming together to have a conversation, if not now, when. And we did have some government officials have a conversation that they are open to working with civil society. How do we transition that from lip service to actually implement? Because we know NESG works with the private sector and has working groups to work with government and then work in collaboration with civil society. So how can that be followed up so that government is a lot more engaging to civil society? Because it can't be, oh, this will favor us. So this initiative, the civil society organization favors us, so we're going to work with you. Then when it doesn't favor us, then you're the enemy. And I mean, you and I can talk about a laundry list of stories. I think Hamzi mentioned the story with Bagega, when he was able to get the money approved, and then they pretty much shut the door. But because of course, grassroots mobilization, advocacy, and what have you, they were able to beat the door down. But how can we ever change this non-responsiveness with government? What can we do so that we all work together? Because I'm gonna just say one more thing. When we're doing some organizing work in Chicago, we're banging the door of the governor's office saying, hey, we want more services for low-level non-violent drug offenders. And we kept banging the door. And the government was like, hey, we're also trying to figure out what to do. So can we work together? I see some of that here in Nigeria. Then the time when it comes to accountability, we need better governance, we need better, then the door is shut and then there's repression. What gives, Abby?
Well, first that there is no silver bullet in dealing with this challenge, and that we need to learn from government itself. So how is government repressing civil society? The first thing I see is the laws, that the laws are, if we had laws that would create a level playing field for civil society, that would strengthen civil society participation, it would be a first step. So one of the ways in which you can do that, for example, is have laws protecting human rights defenders. That government will fight hard, because you see, they think that human rights, well, they're right when they think that human rights defenders and civil society are the only oppositions that they have. We have pretty two political parties in Nigeria, civil society and the guys in government. But if we had laws protecting that space, protecting human rights defenders, social justice activists, that would be a first step. The second step is, it takes a lot of funds to get things done. It takes a lot of funds for civil society to do their everyday work. Now, if we had laws that ensured, for example, that citizens are able to give tax deductively to civil society organizations, that would be another step in the right direction.
Yes.
and other ways in which we can bridge that gap is actually build the capacity of politicians and foster civic movements, grassroots organizing, like you said, that a groundswell of people, a critical mass of people, cannot be resisted by any government. And we've seen this time and again. But it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to build movements and to sustain movements. But we live in a country where it is one issue per day. So if we have a cost today, tomorrow we're going to have a brand new one. Government keeps us really, really busy. But it takes that grounding and building up of movements. And it takes the involvement, wait for this, it takes the involvement of an enlightened middle class to also be able to hold government accountable and build that groundswell from the grassroots. But in Nigeria right now, we don't seem to have a lot of the middle class is a very shrunk space as well. And that's also increasing the shrinking of the civic space. So those are some of the things we need to do. But there are no magic bullets.
And there isn't. I think I was talking to Josephine last week, and she did talk about some of the repressive laws that are put against civil society, and then even highlighting that if there were no repressive laws, then there'll be more citizen engagement, and
correct,
and activists would not have to they would just not have to what do you call that thing again? Self-censor. There you go. So those are some of the issues. And I guess there's a point where we'll get there. And this just alludes to the next question. So now we see the problem. Okay. So I know you talked about ensuring that there's an increased middle class, which is creating an enabling environment. I listened to an interview with Nii Yusuf, who is I think the CEO of Veraki Consulting, and he mentioned that the government provided an enabling environment for fintechs to thrive and IT to thrive. So, which is why we're seeing folks like Flutterwave, PayPal, and so many other bits. So how do we work because it's going to take all of us to keep the civic space open. So what is it going to take? Is there a magic bullet? Is there anything we can do day by day? Are we already doing what we need to do? I guess because sometimes in Nigeria, the prognosis seems so grim, but how do we do our part to keep the civic space open?
First, let me disagree that the government kept the space open for fintechs. I think fintechs were just a group of resilient, coconut-headed Nigerians who decided that we will thrive in spite of Nigeria, and they've done exactly that. And that's something we can be proud of. And that exactly is the Nigerian spirit. But when it comes to civil society, I think one of the first things that's going to help us is also to learn from the fintechs that we're just going to have to be coconut-headed about it, that we're in this, we die here, we thrive here, and we insist on a thriving. But to insist on a thriving, that we need to think of ourselves as a we. And in thinking of ourselves as a we have to think about what are the components of civil society and be very accepting of all the components. We've lost two components already that clearly lost. The labor unions, the student unions. We must bring them back. We're losing another component and we're watching it die and we're doing very little to save it. The media. That you are an endangered species once you're a journalist, and the hazards of the job outweighs the benefits that they get from it. How do we protect journalists, especially investigative journalists, and journalists who speak on social development issues, keeping them safe and ensuring that they are well paid and that they have social security to protect them and also protect them as they do their jobs, whether it is from repressive laws, whether it is from the violence of government-sponsored violence, that those are very, very important parts that, and that we must see ourselves as a whole, like I've said, that whether we're formal groups, we're activists, that there are no illegitimate civil society actors, that we must come together and we must occupy that space together. We will disagree a lot of times, but we must work out what our bare essentials are. What barely do we agree on? And we must build solidarity. Solidarity is something we must build across board. But I'm also concerned, and I found myself thinking about it a lot in the past 2 years, that we need to rebuild Pan-African movements. That if we do not do that, that we're all collectively endangered. The first thing the politicians did was to first divide us when it comes to our countries. So you've got activists in Ghana, activists in Uganda, everybody doing their own thing and being very nationalistic about their civic space. They divided that first. Then they went for the labor unions and they divided further the labor unions. It went for the student unions. They've divided further the student unions. But that we must all come together so that when things are going wrong in Sudan and civil society actors in Sudan cannot speak, they are certain that civil society actors in Nigeria are speaking loud and clear for them. And that when things go wrong in Nigeria, that we're certain that in Uganda, that civil society actors are speaking for us. That would be the way to go. So we've got more to lose if we stay separated and a lot more to gain if we come together. And that we must continue to insist on building allies, very untraditional allies, that even amongst the political class, that people will believe in the civic space, or that people will sit on the fence. We must bring them to our side. We must ensure that we also are able to walk the diplomatic route, that even the governments of other countries are in support of the civic space in Nigeria. We must build children with a consciousness that, and that consciousness is a culture, that we must build that culture where we tell our children and we show them by the way we live that the civic space, Nigeria's civic space, the civic space in Africa is up to them, and that there is no age that is too early, and no point that is too fast for them to begin to join us in occupying that space. The civic space is a culture before it's a geographical or a people orientation, that we must build, or we must sustain that culture and expand that culture.
The civic space is a culture. That is something, even that is something very enlightening. And when you speak of culture, I'm alluding to the interview that I had just last week with Dr. Aine Doroglines, who is the founder of Brittle Paper, and she talked about various literary experts who actually use their platform for activism. So I feel like the civic space and civic actors come in various buckets. You talk about celebrities, and different players in the civic space, and it's just for us to kind of be more of a collective.
Solidarity.
Yes, so that we're able to work together to move forward. So it's really something. Now I want to talk about the documentary that Global Rights released, which was very enlightening for me, about the inception of organizing and advocacy in Nigeria and the civic space. I wanted to, communicating about the civic space, which is what we're doing even right now. Like, what was the pulse of the public when you released it? What was the feedback?
Well, I think that for a lot of the public, especially the younger generation, they had no idea of how strong and vibrant Nigerian civil society has been over the years, pre-colonial, during the colonial era, and post-colonial. And that it was a lot of people saying we need more. We need to understand where we're coming from, because that determines where we're going to. So the reception has been good. And so we're planning a follow-up on that documentary as well.
Awesome, awesome. Because I think it's really something for civil society, for people to know the role of civil society, and
Mhm.
because I feel like when there is no knowledge, then there's an issue. I mean, I was talking to someone who was extremely learned in the corporate sector, and they said that NSAS was sponsored by Yahoo Boys. Abby, I, when this person is a loved one and you don't want to start nothing, you like, if you don't start nothing, it ain't gonna be nothing.
Mm,
You just understand that it's not
mm,
their fault. It's not their fault. It's not,
right,
they're not good people. It's just the awareness
right,
and more interaction about civil society
right.
that for us to kind of come together, you know. So we're gonna go to our next question. So now, and guys, those of you in the audience, thank you guys so much for coming on. I'm just so appreciative of each and every one of you. Thank you, friends, loved ones, viewers. Please, if you are, if you have any questions for Abiodun, look, she is like the thought leader when it comes to the civic space. So if you want any answers right now, she gonna give it to you, okay? And as we're having this session, I am like a sponge and I'm learning so much from her. So I'm sure you are too. So if you have any questions, please put it in the comments and then we'll continue this conversation, okay? So now, our next question, according to Civicus, I'm sure you've already read this stuff. Nigeria's ranking has been reduced from obstructed to repressed. How do we recover? Wow.
Hmm.
is is there hope for us? How do we recover from repressed to obstructed, and going up the ladder?
Well, I would say that we've got quite we've got quite a grounds to cover. But the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a step. We move. We just need to move. And we need to strategize. And it's a lot of the things we've spoken about in the course of our conversation today. But also that as I listen to you talk about, the perception of the NSAS movement, where a well-educated Nigerian, possibly middle class, thought that this was sponsored by Yahoo Boys. It made me think that we have not engaged the public enough. One of the things that we will easily accuse the Buhari administration of is not communicating well enough. Perhaps we're not communicating well enough. Putting out veritable narratives of exactly what is going on, the truth. The truth always has a way of opening up space, of throwing light into things, and that the more people that know the truth, the more they're willing to join us, the more they're willing to fight the repression. Another way to fight the repression is we're also not using the courts well enough. I know that we keep pointing out that there's some level of co-option in the courts, that you've got governments is dabble their fingers into the courts, but that by and large you still have the judiciary, judges who will do right by people, especially when we're able to give sufficient airwave to what is going on. We've got the arts. You've mentioned celebrities, but I think of them more as the art, whether it's in music, it's in fiction writing, it is in acting, in Nollywood, that those are places where we can recover, and that we have to really be creative about recovering. And also very, very importantly, about recovering, about controlling the narrative, ensuring that the truth is what is out, is that we have to go to the ballots and vote. One of the things
Yes.
I'm sure you had done as a community organizer is that going from door to door, one-on-one conversations, about why it is important for citizens to reclaim back their government. And this government has gone rogue on us. We all acknowledge that. But that the only way in which we can reclaim governance and be self-governed and move out of this pseudo colonialism in which we found ourselves is to massively hit the ballots. Now, if we do not get a critical mass of Nigerians, at least 40 to 50 million people voting in the next elections, we may not get it right. So one-on-one, and it's hard work, and it is each one tell one, enrich the other, that we've just got to keep moving, and we've got to keep speaking. And I was moderating a session on NSARS roughly more than a week ago. And Shoma said something very important. She said, don't stop speaking. And I totally agree with her. And I think that's the message for civil society in Nigeria. No matter how repressed we feel, don't stop speaking. No matter how traumatized and exhausted we feel, we are not going down without a fight, and we're not going down without our voices loud and clear.
Thank you so much. That was, we just have to just keep speaking, you know. And I'm going to even allude to our next question on the fact that we all need to continue to have a candid conversation. So, like I said earlier in the program, I had I had the privilege of attending the Nigerian Economic Summit, the 27th year. It went excellent. Thank the CEO, Mr. Jayola, and his team. They put together an excellent event. So so one of the plenary sessions was holding government accountable, and the Minister Lai Mohammed was there, the Minister of Information, and he had various conversations, of which I recorded, and I will be sharing over the next few days. Talking about how the media needs to get to know the government, and that the government, that they keep speaking out of context, that they can cause a war off of social media, that just different statements he was making. And I took a picture up with him, at least proof that I was there. But it was quite a conversation. And one thing he said was that media needs to get to know government before reporting. I want to get your thoughts on that. And let me just mention this to folks that are on the ground, because a lot of times we hear snippets about his conversations in the media and what have you. He's an extremely charismatic person. He can work a room. Oh yeah. So, but those of us that are in civil society are just keenly aware of the issues that affect us and affect the civic space. So, so you can kind of eat the meat and throw away the bones, so to speak. So this is the quote that he made. So I wanted to just get your thoughts on it.
Well, it's very exhausting having to deal with a regime that has perfected the art of gaslighting. And unfortunately, this Minister of Information has. And that if the administration is not apt in putting out information of their own narrative of what is going on, they should not ask for anyone to do that for them. Now, the media in Nigeria is highly repressed and are doing the best that they can in the circumstance in which they exist. It's very difficult for the media to publish the news without government coming after them. And that in that instance, is comment to say media needs to get to know government before reporting is pretty much saying that you should behave yourself to us and report exactly what we want. But then that's not the truth, and that's not participatory governance, and that is not acceptable. So unfortunately, it would seem that Mr. Mohammed hasn't quite understood what his job is meant to be.
And one thing that was highlighted was that he has one of the largest media syndicates, which is NTA. And if you want to compare it to the BBC, which is the
Mhm.
British Broadcasting company, or corporation, you
You
see
reach more
that
people.
you are able to reach more people. You are able to show your narrative. You're able to get in front of the news, because I feel like government, at least based on what I see in the US, but though the US is a PR machine in and of itself, we have, you have a situation where you get in front of the news as the government and say, look, this is what is happening. This is what we've researched, and here is the outcome. So because once something happens, and for me, this regime, it's a lot worse. But when you look at other regimes, you find that you have this same issue
Mhm.
where the government doesn't get in front of the news. Maybe something catastrophic just happened, and then you find yourself not the government not getting in front of it. Then people have their own interpretations of what happened,
That's
and then
correct.
they are reactionary. That's not how it works. You have to be more proactive in the news, and then you take it from there. And he never really answered the question of why he shut down Twitter, which was why I even went into that plenary. Okay, why did you do it? What is the problem? You get what I'm
I
saying?
can
So I was
I
just
can
trying
tell you for free why they shut down Twitter.
I mean, you say it like I was trying to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, I know, but you see, the horse realizes that that this is being foolhardy, and so he tells you need to get to know me and not judge me. But then
Mm,
your actions speak for you, and those
mhm.
actions are what we will judge you by. You're not even putting out words, but then your actions speak for you. Whether it is banning Twitter 2 days after Twitter deleted a tweet from the president, and then a couple of months after Twitter expressed support for the NSARS movement, it's pretty clear why you banned Twitter. Should have gone ahead and banned Facebook too. And that you think, for example, that we've had a president who spent quite a chunk of his administration in hospital. Until today, Nigerians have no idea what's going on with him and why we cannot treat him in our own country. That you've got the optics of banditry, or what government has termed banditry, that citizens are insisting should be called terrorism. But because you want to make things sound nice and light, you'd rather call terrorists bandits and insist that the
Exactly.
media calls them bandits rather than what they
Exactly.
are. That
What they really are.
media cannot report objectively the number of people who are killed on a daily basis in Nigeria, except the numbers is sanctioned by government. That you're the same minister who continues to make it very hard and put the media through loops and insist then that the media isn't loving you, isn't trying to get to know you. That's gaslighting, and it's a whole, let's save that language off here. So,
Ah,
yeah.
yeah, we are very, very clear on gaslighting, really trying to alter the reality
Yeah.
of the citizens, and making them look at your own reality. And
Mhm.
it's very unfortunate. And man, that brother can work a room. He can work a room. I
Uh,
mean, if
if,
I wasn't a civic actor, I mean, I would have taken drank his Kool-Aid too. So it's just it's understandable in terms of what's going on, and we just have to just continue to speak out, and really try to
yeah.
preserve the civic space. So
Mhm.
I am going to bring it to the floor. Do you guys have any questions? Everyone, on civil society organizations, and the civic space? What I'm going to do is just let me just say a few thank yous. I want to thank Mrs. Sylvia Abdallah, Mr. Greg Inaholo, Dr. Bridget Egboha, Mrs. Eki Igbinedion, and Mrs. Iwelome, Mr. Ibrahim, Dr. Joe's vlog. Thank you guys for commenting and interacting. And those of you who just watched and didn't say anything, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you. If not for you, you guys are just encouraging me to continue to connect civil society to the public, because we do a lot of good work, Abby, and we do a lot of good work, and unfortunately, the challenges with civil society is funding. So we have the funding just allocated for programmatic, and then we just try to use some of our admin funding to communicate our work to the public. So which affects the public really knowing how awesome civil society is and how great some of the great work we do. And I believe that some of the smartest people in the world are here. I'm honored to interview learned folks like yourself. So I'm just gonna just go straight into your final thoughts. Abby, thank you so much. Just give us your final thoughts on our conversation on civil society organizations and keeping the civic space open.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, Efwa.
Thank you.
Some of my final thoughts are not particularly related to the questions that you've asked, but that we need to protect our civic actors and their mental well-being. There's a lot of vicarious trauma out there in this space. There's a lot of things going on in the country on a daily basis. As you've said, a lot of donors would provide funding for programming, but then will not provide funding for taking care of those who execute these programs. That we need to pay that attention to the civic actors, ensure they get the kind of support that they need, not just in terms of remuneration, but also in terms of their mental health and their well-being and their protection as well on a day-to-day basis. It's a very stressful environment in which we continue to work, but then it's a very stressful environment in which we must ensure that its critical actors are protected. We need to protect our civic actors. And as I've also said, we need solidarity. We need to band it together, whether it is the media, artists, activists, NGOs, student unions, labor unions, however your entry point into the civic movement is, that we need to come together, and that Pan-African civil society is imperative. We must reach across borders, and we must hold hands to resist the onslaught that has come on our continent for the third time.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I see my previous speaker of last week, Dr. Josephine Ogazia-Gwondo. Thank you so much for being here. She's been here all through. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Abby, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This has been such an interactive conversation about the civic space and the role of civil society organizations and how we can work together and how everybody can get involved in terms of keeping the civic space open. And really, let me just say one last thing. So how now we're going to be going through the elections now, in 2023. How do we use this seismic shift to shift the paradigm in terms of the civic space? How do we hold the next administration accountable? Because I know, of course, we would need to go to the ballot boxes. We would need to get our PVCs. That's for one. What do we do when they get there to make sure that we're able to hold their feet to the fire in terms of keeping the civic space open?
What I always say, and I say to politicians, I've always said that, look, the real campaign starts after elections. That for every single policy that you're going to pursue, that's when you need to go after citizens. Maybe I've said it not so much in the Nigerian context, because of course then politicians get into office and they have too much power. But that I will flip that and say that to citizens, that the conversation with government starts once they're in office. First, we choose the right people, then we engage the right people from day one to the very end, and that we must organize ourselves to consistently engage and demand accountability. every step of the way. Democracy, in my opinion, is the lightest form of democracy is what we do with the ballots. The democracy is what we do every day as citizens, participating, not just holding accountable, but participating in governance, understanding what is at stake, understanding what government is doing, and then demanding accountability, deciding what our own trajectory as a country should be. And that involves every citizen, which takes me to then the role of civil society in that is helping every citizen understand that how important they are in these conversations, that we don't need a few voices. And that's what civil society, the formal civil society has done for them, be their voice, but that we must amplify every voice. Every single voice counts. Whether you're young, you're old, you're below 18, above 65, whether you live with disability, you're a woman, you're a man, that we must all hold them accountable. No democracy is dependent on its politicians. Politicians are the same everywhere in the world. What we need are vigilant citizens, and that's what Nigerian citizens must be every day, every single day.
Thank you so much for that. That is excellent. Thank you for that. So again, Abby, thank you so much for this conversation. I have seen you on various fora, and you knock it out of the park, and today you did not disappoint. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And we will talk again later. I am going to be in 2022. I'm going to be having a forum of the Civic Space discussion series. So it's going to be a subset of Devsectorseries, and it's going to be an extensive discussion. And it's going to be more of a panel. And all the stakeholders that you just mentioned in this discussion are going to be categorized, and each week we're going to be having them really hash out what their participation is, what challenges they have, and what their role is moving forward in keeping the civic space open, because this is so vital. I just feel like we as civil society, we are the last frontier in terms of if we are crushed, we're done. Afghanistan, Afghanistan, no me, we're done.
Yeah.
Afghanistan, Libya,
Syria,
Syria. There you go. So I'm just looking at the urgency of it is what really is sparking this conversation. Again, Abby, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Afua. And on a final note, it's the lack of civil society in Ethiopia that is at the cusp of what's going on in Ethiopia. So let's keep our civic space, Nigeria.
Thank you. All right, guys, you heard from this awesome speaker, Abiodun Baiyewu, who is an internationally acclaimed development expert who works on a plethora of issues, like I said in her video bio. So guys, just continue to join me. I'm gonna be on next week, Devsectorseries at the same time next week at 12 noon. Just a few announcements. So we have an online course, which is NGO Fundraising for Social Impact. If you're interested, visit www.socialimpact.ng. Okay. And again, we have a grant writing workshop, which is scheduled for November 25th to the 26th. Okay, we're going to be having, and it's going to be experiential learning, y'all. So we're not just going to be giving y'all theory. We're actually going to have some of the best resource persons in the business working with you on actual grant proposals, so that you can get more money and so that you can continue to have the resources to change the world. This is a passion of mine, going around the country, talking to passionate civil society organizations that have the passion, that see the need, that want to change the world, but don't have the resources. So this is my way of helping and you to build your capacity. Okay, so make sure you sign up. Go on www.socialimpact.ng, but where you can really find it is on my Facebook page, www.socialimpact.ng. Okay, once you go on my Facebook page, I said my website, Facebook page, you will see the event, okay? And all the details are there. You can check it out. I have to create another page on my website for it, But guys, make sure you sign up for it, okay? If you're like, well, I don't know what grant to do, I really don't know much about this fundraising stuff, go on my website, go to courses, it's right there, and then you're able to get what you need, okay? All right, thank you so much, and let's change the world together, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.